There was a raccoon staring at me from inside our garbage can. That's how my Thursday started. I'd walked out barefoot in my pajama pants at 5:41 a.m., holding a mug of cold coffee and a bag of trash that smelled suspiciously like shrimp, even though neither of us ate seafood. I lifted the lid, saw two beady eyes and a face that looked just as startled as mine. We both froze for a second. Then the raccoon bolted, knocking over the bin and scattering half a dozen receipts across the driveway. I bent down to pick them up, mumbling to myself like an old man, annoyed more at the mess than anything else. That's when I saw it, a folded square of thermal paper tucked inside a crushed yogurt container. The kind of receipt you get from a gas station or a fast food joint. But this one wasn't from any place I recognized. Room 203, Lakeview Pines Inn. 3:14 p.m. to 7:52 p.m. One guest. Paid in cash. And the kicker? The receipt had her loyalty card number printed at the top. Dana's. It felt like the air got thicker around me. I stared at the numbers, doing the math in my head. That date, that was the same day she said she was at the dentist. She came home with a numb jaw and a small paper bag of toothpaste samples. We even joked about the way she was slurring her words. I believed her. I stood there in the driveway for what must have been 10 minutes, coffee forgotten, toes numb against the cold concrete, while the sun peeked over the horizon like it didn't care what it had just revealed. When I walked back inside, I didn't confront her. I placed the receipt on the kitchen table under a salt shaker. I waited for her to come down, pretending everything was normal. She asked about the garbage. I said the raccoon one. She laughed. Then she picked up the salt to season her eggs and froze. Her eyes flicked down to the receipt. She blinked, and without saying a word, she sat down and ate her eggs. That was the beginning of the end, though I didn't know it yet. The next few days passed like a fever dream. She started picking up her phone with her body turned away from me. Her showers got longer. Her hugs shorter. The house felt like a hallway, all transition, no destination. Then, one Tuesday morning, she left me a note. I'm sorry. I need to be honest with myself before I can be honest with you. And just like that, she was gone. No fight. No tears. No bags packed in front of me. Just a half-empty closet and a silence that wrapped itself around everything like static in the walls. I didn't eat much. I stopped watering the fern in the kitchen. It died in 3 weeks. I kept the receipt in my sock drawer like a cursed object. People always ask, did you try to talk to her? Of course I did. But her phone was disconnected. Email bounced back. Her mom didn't know where she was. So I waited. Because that's what you do when you're the one left behind. You wait. You replay conversations. You doubt your memory. You think, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe it wasn't an affair. Maybe room 203 was just, I don't know, a nap? But deep down, I knew. And then, 114 days later, on a windy March afternoon, she came back. Not knocking. Not calling. Just walking through the back door like she'd never left. Hair longer. Clothes different. A necklace I didn't recognize. She said, can we talk? And that was when I realized. This wasn't about explanations. It was about consequences. She stepped into the kitchen like she'd just returned from a short walk, not 4 months of total radio silence. Her keys were still on the hook. Her mug was still in the cabinet. Everything looked the same, except her. Something in her posture had changed. She didn't walk with the same clipped confidence I remembered. She moved slowly, as if the floor might collapse beneath her. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there near the sink, holding a dripping sponge, halfway through cleaning a glass that had gone untouched for weeks. I watched as she sat down in the same chair she used to sit in every morning, legs crossed, elbow on the table, like she belonged. Like she hadn't detonated a bomb and vanished in the smoke. The silence was dense. Then she spoke. I ended it, she said softly, looking at the floor. I blinked. You ended what? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes scanned the room like she was checking if the place remembered her. As if the cabinets might judge her. As if the dust on the microwave had an opinion. I hated how familiar she still looked, how my body still recognized her scent, even as my mind screamed to forget. With him, she said. I ended it a while ago. I just didn't know how to come back. Or if you'd even want me to. I didn't know how to process that. So I just asked the only thing that came to mind. Why now? She shrugged, and it sent a chill through me. Shrugging. As if this was a casual check-in, not the return from betrayal. Because I couldn't stop thinking about you, she said, her voice shaking slightly. Even when I was with him. Even when I thought I was happy. I kept picturing your face. The way you butter toast on both sides when you're stressed. The way you hate when people clap when the plane lands. You haunted me. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt powerful, desired. But instead, all I felt was tired. Exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't fix. You left a note, I said quietly. A single note. After a decade together. Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached across the table. I stepped back before her hand could touch mine. You said you needed to be honest with yourself, I said. Were you? She nodded. Yes. And the truth is, I was chasing something that didn't exist. I thought passion had to look a certain way. Wild, unpredictable, burning hot. But that's not love. That's just chaos. What we have, is quieter. But it's real. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to take her in my arms, smell her hair, forget the months of silence, the room 203 receipt, the echo of her voice saying, I need to be honest with myself. But I couldn't. Because while she had been finding herself, I had been unraveling. You slept with him, I said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even an accusation. It was a confirmation of something I'd already accepted but never spoken aloud. She flinched. Yes. I nodded. I stayed here, I said. I fed your plants. I folded your sweaters. I picked up the shampoo you liked because I thought, maybe, you'd walk through that door and need it. She covered her face with her hands. I'm sorry, Russ. I messed up. I didn't know how to fix it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her why she got to come back now, after all the pain, the humiliation, the questions I'd whispered into my pillow at night. But all I did was ask. Did you love him? She hesitated. Just long enough to answer everything. No, she finally said. I thought I did. But I didn't. And I believed her. Not because I wanted to, but because I could see the shame in her eyes. The way her mouth trembled when she said it. The way her hands kept twisting the ring she still wore. My ring. But that didn't fix anything. It didn't rewind the months I spent eating cereal for dinner or walking past our favorite bench at the park pretending it didn't gut me. She looked up at me, eyes hopeful. Can we talk? Really talk? I stared at her for a long time. And then I said something I hadn't planned. Not here. That surprised her. It surprised me too. Then where? She asked. I paused, glanced at the calendar still hanging beside the fridge. October. Almost a year since the receipt. Let's go for a drive, I said. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere we can scream if we have to. She nodded. And just like that, we were in the car again. Together. But nothing felt the same. Because this wasn't a reconciliation. It was a reckoning. We didn't speak for the first 20 minutes of the drive. The road stretched out like a ribbon of unfinished conversations. She stared out the passenger window, occasionally reaching up to tuck her hair behind her ear, the same way she used to when we were dating back when we believed in things like anniversaries and promises. I watched the trees blur past, bare branches scraping at the sky like questions I didn't know how to ask anymore. I didn't know where I was going. I just kept driving north. Somewhere rural. Somewhere unremarkable. I didn't want landmarks or memory traps. I wanted distance, the kind that isn't measured in miles but in discomfort. The kind that makes people say things they've been swallowing for months. Finally, after a long silence, she asked, Do you hate me? It wasn't soft or shy. It was direct, like she'd rehearsed it a dozen times in her head. I kept my eyes on the road. No, I said, but I don't trust you. She nodded slowly, like she expected that. Maybe even welcomed it. Still, there was a flicker of pain in her eyes, and part of me hated that I noticed it. I didn't plan it, she said. It started out harmless. Coffee after the gym. A few texts. Then more. Then too many. Then everything. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. And then you stopped coming home. That was the worst mistake of my life. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because I'd said the same sentence to myself every morning for months. We pulled off onto an old logging road I hadn't driven in years. There was a clearing up ahead with a small overlook, nothing impressive, just a patch of gravel and a crooked wooden bench someone once nailed into the ground. I parked the car, shut off the engine, and let the silence settle in like fog. I got out without saying anything and walked toward the bench. She followed. The wind picked up, and for a second it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. We sat down. I need you to tell me everything, I said. Not the pretty version. Not the apology tour. The real thing. She inhaled slowly, looked out over the trees. Her voice was a whisper, but every word landed like a punch. His name was Milo. He was married. We met at a yoga class, the one I said I quit. He made me feel seen. Like I mattered. Like I wasn't just part of a routine. That hurt. More than I thought it would. Because I tried. God, I tried. I brought her flowers randomly. I remembered what kind of dressing she liked. I made her laugh even when I was falling apart. I thought I was in love with him, she continued. I thought maybe that meant I wasn't in love with you anymore. I didn't want to cheat, but I didn't want to feel invisible either. I looked down at my hands. So you picked secret motel rooms over honesty. I picked escape, she said. I know that sounds pathetic, but it's the truth. And I stayed in that fantasy until it got ugly. I looked up. Ugly how? Her mouth trembled. His wife found out. She sent me pictures. Of us. Of the motel. Of me kissing him in my car. I didn't even know she existed until then. He told me they were separated. I leaned back on the bench, trying to process it. I'd imagined all kinds of scenarios over the months. But somehow, knowing she wasn't just a cheater, she was the other woman, twisted the knife in a way I hadn't expected. That's when you ended it? She nodded. That was the last day I saw him. I deleted everything. I blocked him. I went home and stared at the ceiling for hours. I didn't eat. I didn't speak. I barely slept for weeks. I just rotted. Because I realized I'd burned down a good man's trust for something that never even existed. We sat in silence again. Only this time, it wasn't heavy. It was raw. I don't know what you want from me, she said eventually. Forgiveness? Punishment? To scream at me? I turned toward her. I want to know why I wasn't enough. Her face crumbled at that. Her hands covered her mouth, and her shoulders shook. But I didn't comfort her. I just watched. Because I needed to see it. I needed to know she actually felt the destruction she'd caused. I don't have a good answer, she finally said. You were always enough. I wasn't. I was scared of feeling ordinary. I thought love had to feel like fireworks. But fireworks burn out. And I destroyed us trying to chase that high. I stood up. I don't know what happens next. Neither do I. And that, strangely, was the first honest thing we'd said to each other in over a year. We drove back in silence. No music. No small talk. No plans. Just the sound of old wounds reopening and new ones waiting to form. After the drive, I didn't invite her to stay. I didn't ask her to leave either. I just pulled into the driveway, got out of the car, and went inside. She lingered for a second, like she wasn't sure what the rules were anymore. Then she followed me in without a word. We moved around the house like strangers in a museum, careful, quiet, constantly looking at the past. She walked into the living room and stopped. Everything was exactly as she left it, except colder. That room had been the scene of so many everyday moments, spilled coffee on the rug, fights over Netflix passwords, her laughter echoing when the dog used to chase his tail into the lamp. And now? It was a room with too many ghosts. I don't expect things to go back, she said, not looking at me. I just needed to see if there was anything left. Even a flicker. I wanted to say something profound, but instead I said the truth. I don't know if I'm angry or just tired. She nodded like she understood, then walked over to the bookshelf and pulled something down. It was the wooden box I kept tucked behind the old gardening books, our wedding photos. I hadn't touched it since she left. I couldn't. It felt radioactive. I never stopped loving this version of us, she whispered, flipping through the images. I just forgot what it looked like. I stood behind her, watching her thumb across photos of us smiling in ugly beige chairs, cutting a cake that tilted slightly to the left, kissing in front of a backdrop made by her cousin with too much glitter. The past looked innocent, untouched by guilt or shame. Like two people who really believed they were bulletproof. Why'd you keep them? She asked. You could have burned them. I gave a tired laugh. I wanted to. I even bought a lighter. But I couldn't do it. Not because I wanted to remember, but because I didn't want to feel like a villain in my own house. She sat on the couch and pulled her knees up to her chest. She looked small, fragile in a way that scared me, because I used to be the one who broke, not her. His wife messaged me again last week, she said suddenly. I turned. What? She found my work email. Sent a paragraph that wrecked me. Said I ruined her life, her children's trust. That I'll never undo what I helped break. I didn't know what to say. I had spent months hating a man I'd never met. A man who helped destroy my marriage. And now I found myself imagining his wife, reading receipts and texts in a cold kitchen, the way I once did. Maybe she had her own drawer full of unanswered questions. Maybe she still slept on one side of the bed, just in case. She's right, I finally said. Dana didn't argue. And for once, I didn't feel like screaming. I just felt hollow. That night, she stayed in the guest room. The bed still had her old flannel sheets, the ones with tiny pine trees and foxes she used to love. She closed the door quietly, and I stood outside it for a full minute, hand on the knob, wondering what would happen if I opened it and crawled in beside her, not out of forgiveness, but loneliness. But I didn't. I went to bed alone, again. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan and wondering how many versions of me had already died in this house. At 2:47 a.m., I got up. I walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and grabbed the last piece of leftover pie. I don't know why. I wasn't hungry. I just needed something to do. And that's when I noticed her phone on the table. It was lit up, a notification from an unfamiliar app one didn't recognize. I'm not proud of what I did next. I picked it up, and what I saw made my stomach turn. It was a message. Just 3 words. From someone saved as unknown number 3. It said, "Still miss you." I stared at it, heart pounding. Not from jealousy, but from the sheer weight of everything she hadn't told me. I thought the affair was over. She swore she'd blocked him, that she'd buried it. But this was something else. I set the phone down and backed away like it might explode. I didn't wake her up. I didn't storm into the room and demand answers. I just stood in the hallway, breathing too loudly, pie forgotten in my hand, and thought, what if she never really came back? What if she only returned because he closed the door, and I was just the backup plan? The flicker she mentioned earlier? The one she hoped still existed between us. Maybe it never went out. But tonight, it felt like it was choking me. By morning, I hadn't slept. I didn't even pretend to try. I just sat in the armchair next to the living room window all night, listening to the water heater cycle and the walls creak like the house itself was whispering that I was a fool. Her phone was still on the kitchen table when the sun rose, exactly where I'd left it. Still lit up, still taunting me with those 3 words, "Still miss you." I knew I should have woken her up then and there. Demanded the truth. Demanded answers. Demanded anything other than the continued performance of remorse I had bought into. But I didn't. Instead, I did something I'm not proud of. Again, I picked up the phone. I unlocked it using the code I still remembered, her birthday. She hadn't changed it. That felt like an insult, somehow. Like she never expected me to touch it. Or maybe she didn't care if I did. There were no texts from unknown number 3. Just that single message in some kind of disappearing message app I'd never seen before. One where the conversation deleted itself after being read, unless you changed the settings. But I knew what I saw. I hadn't imagined it. "Still miss you." I stared at that line like it was carved into my ribs. The worst part? She never replied. Not yet, at least. That somehow made it worse. That it was just hanging there. A line left dangling. A trap waiting to be sprung. Was she going to answer later? Had she already? Had they spoken recently on another platform I didn't recognize? I started opening apps I didn't even know existed. Some were empty. Others password protected. I felt sick. Not from what I was doing, but from realizing how easy it was to fall back into that spiral of desperation. I was becoming someone I hated. A man who snooped. A man who begged. A man who held on to a love that had long since withered and was now rotting quietly beneath the surface. She came downstairs an hour later, wearing my old hoodie. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, her eyes puffy with sleep. She looked exactly like she used to on lazy Sundays, before errands and emotional distance replaced intimacy. She smiled. "Hey." I didn't smile back. She noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" I turned the screen toward her. Her smile vanished. "I found your phone," I said flatly. She stared at the message for a full 10 seconds before speaking. "It's not what you think." I actually laughed out loud. "That's the most predictable thing you could have said." She reached for the phone, but I pulled it back. "Who is he?" I asked. "It's not. He doesn't matter." I stood up fast. Too fast. My knee cracked from sitting too long. "He doesn't matter? Are you seriously trying to feed me that again? After everything? After telling me you ended it?" "I did," she said, voice rising now. "I told you the truth about everything. I blocked him. I cut all ties. I didn't expect him to reach out. And I didn't respond. But you didn't delete it either. I didn't see it until this morning. You saw it first. And you weren't going to tell me." Silence. There it was. Confirmation. She sat down slowly, the hoodie sleeves falling past her wrists. "Russell, I came back because I wanted to make this right. I know that sounds hollow after what you saw, but it's the truth. I've been trying." "No," I said. "You've been trying to manage guilt. That's not the same as trying to love me." The words sat heavy between us. I should have stopped there. Should have walked away, let her sit in the weight of it. But I couldn't help myself. I had to push further. I had to bleed. Did you come back because you missed me? I asked. Or because he stopped answering your calls? She looked away, which told me everything. I stepped back like she'd slapped me. My breath came in tight waves. It felt like something inside me was cracking open in slow motion. I was your safety net, I whispered. The soft place to land when you realized the man you burned everything for didn't want you either. No, she said too quickly. No, that's not. I held up a hand. I need you to leave. Her eyes widened. What? I need you to leave, I repeated. Not forever. Not yet. But today. Right now. Because if you stay, I'll either forgive you when I'm not ready, or I'll say something I can't take back. And I can't afford either of those outcomes. She looked stunned, hurt, angry, but she stood. And without another word, she walked out the front door. No bag. No dramatic goodbye. Just silence. I sank to the floor, my back against the wall, staring at the empty doorway where she just stood. I had always feared losing her. Now I feared getting her back. Because if this was what love looked like when it returned, I wasn't sure I wanted it. After she left that morning, the silence in the house didn't feel peaceful. It felt predatory. Like it was waiting to consume whatever was left of me. I paced from room to room, not really looking for anything, just making sure everything was still where it belonged. Her mug still sat in the drying rack. Her sneakers were still by the door. I caught myself checking the fridge for that terrible almond yogurt she always liked. It was gone. Of course it was. She was gone again, but not entirely. Late that afternoon, I noticed something strange wedged in the gap between the couch cushion and the frame. It looked like a folded napkin at first, one of those brown ones from the coffee shop downtown. But when I pulled it out, I realized it was a letter. Handwritten. Folded twice. My name scribbled across the front in her handwriting. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me didn't want to open it. I wasn't ready for another apology. Or some twisted confession that she hadn't told me everything. I didn't think I could handle more emotional landmines. But curiosity, or maybe masochism, won out. I unfolded the letter. Russell, if you're reading this, I probably didn't say everything I needed to. I don't know when I wrote this, exactly. I just know that one night I sat on the couch and realized I couldn't keep pretending I hadn't broken us. So I wrote this, not as a way out, but maybe as a way through. You deserve to know something I never said. There was another man. Before Milo. It only happened once. Last spring. A weekend when I told you I was going on a yoga retreat. You even helped me pack. That still haunts me. He was someone I knew from college. Not close, but familiar. I ran into him at the farmer's market, of all places. He flirted. I flirted back. It felt like a game. Until it wasn't. I didn't love him. I didn't even like him much. But I felt seen. And that terrified me how easy it was to risk everything for something so hollow. I told myself it meant nothing. That I could bury it. But the guilt changed me. And you noticed, didn't you? You asked if something was wrong. I said I was just tired. You kissed my forehead and made me pancakes the next morning. I wanted to come clean then. But I didn't. And that decision was the start of all the others. I'm sorry. I sat down on the floor, the letter trembling in my hands. My eyes scanned the words again, as if they might rearrange themselves into something less devastating. There was another man. Before Milo. All this time, I thought I had a handle on the shape of her betrayal. I had categorized it, labeled it, even started to build emotional scaffolding around it. But now I realized I'd been grieving the wrong version of her. The truth wasn't a clean break. It was a slow rot, one I never even smelled until the floor gave out. And worst of all, I remembered that weekend. I remembered hugging her goodbye in the driveway, telling her to enjoy her retreat. I even remembered texting her on Sunday, asking how the classes went. She replied, I feel like I've finally exhaled. I thought that was about yoga. I thought it was about healing. But she was justifying something else. She was already slipping away. I sat there for hours, holding that letter, until the light in the room shifted and the shadows got longer. At some point, I turned on the lamp without realizing it. At another, I cried quiet, dry sobs that hurt my throat. No yelling. No punching walls. Just the kind of crying that makes you feel like your body is trying to cough up your soul. And then, like a ghost, I began moving. I grabbed a box from the closet, one I hadn't opened in months. Inside were all the tokens I had refused to part with, old photos, anniversary cards, plane tickets from our last vacation. Little pieces of a life that I had tried to preserve out of some foolish hope that they might be restored. One by one, I began placing them in the trash. Not to punish her, but because I didn't recognize us in them anymore. That night, I didn't eat. I didn't shower. I didn't speak to anyone. But I did something else. I wrote her a letter. Not because I thought she deserved it, but because I needed to hear myself say the words. And as I folded the page, placed it beside her phone, and locked the front door behind me, I realized something strange. I didn't hate her, but I no longer loved her either. And that was the beginning of something new, even if I didn't know what that was yet. The next morning was the first in nearly a year that I woke up and didn't think of her the second my eyes opened. It took maybe 7 minutes this time. I lay there in bed, the sunlight cutting across the room in long gold bars, and instead of feeling hollow, I just felt still. No panic. No shame. No aching hope clawing at my chest. Just stillness. I thought, for a fleeting moment, that maybe this was the beginning of healing. That maybe the worst had passed. That the letter I left for her would be my final word, and whatever happened next would happen somewhere outside of me, no longer infecting every inch of my mind. I made a real breakfast that morning. Eggs. Toast. I didn't check my phone. I didn't glance at the window every 5 minutes expecting a car to pull up. For once, I let the silence fill the house without trying to smother it. But peace, I'm starting to learn, is rarely permanent. That afternoon, I got a knock on the door. Not her. It was a man I'd never seen before. Late 30s. Red windbreaker. Cheap sunglasses hanging off his shirt collar. He stood on the porch like he already knew I wasn't going to like what he had to say. "Russell Grant?" he asked. I nodded, cautious. "Yeah." He pulled a small envelope from his pocket. "I was asked to deliver this to you. In person." "By who?" I'm not at liberty to say. That phrase alone should have been my warning. But I took the envelope anyway. He gave a polite nod, turned, and walked off like he'd just dropped off a pizza. I closed the door, locked it, and stared at the envelope like it might be booby-trapped. There was no name on the front. No return address. Just my name, printed in neat block letters. I opened it slowly, half expecting something vile. What I found was worse. Inside was a photograph. A recent one. Dana, my wife, sitting across from someone in a cafe I recognized. It was only a few blocks away. She was laughing, leaning forward, her hand resting lightly over someone else's. The other person? Milo. The man she swore she ended things with. The man she told me blocked her, ignored her, discarded her. And there they were, smiling, comfortable, intimate. On the back of the photo, written in red pen, were 4 words. She never really stopped. I dropped the photo. My stomach turned so violently I had to sit down. My first thought was, maybe this was old. Maybe it was taken before she came back. But no, she was wearing the same sweater she'd left in my guest room. One I'd washed last week. Her hair was longer. The trees outside the window still had leaves. It was recent. She lied. Again. Not just about the past, but about everything she said in that clearing. Everything she told me about healing, ending things, returning with clarity, all of it rehearsed. All of it manipulation. And I, like an absolute idiot, let her back in. I picked up the photo again, stared at it, memorized the curve of her smile. I wanted to throw it in the fireplace. I wanted to run outside and scream until my lungs gave out. But instead, I just whispered one word. Why? Not why she cheated. Not why she lied. But why come back? Why fake the remorse? Why waste my time if she never really intended to stay? I went upstairs and tore open the drawer where her things still sat folded. Her perfume. Her hairbrush. Her scarf with the tiny embroidered foxes. I gathered it all, dumped it into a trash bag, and threw it into the garage. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just moved like a man performing a necessary surgery on himself. And yet, in the middle of it, I found something I wasn't expecting. Tucked into the back of the drawer, behind her scarf, was a receipt. Lakeview Pines Inn. Room 203. Again. Dated just 1 week ago. She had gone back. Not metaphorically. Not in her mind. Physically. Tangibly. Again. After everything. After all her promises. All her letters. All our conversations. After the drive. The truth. The so-called healing. She had returned to the same place, the very room number that had broken us the first time. That was the moment something in me snapped. Not in an angry, vengeful way. Not in a dramatic movie scene way. It was quieter. Cleaner. I sat on the edge of the bed, receipt in one hand, photograph in the other. And I decided I would disappear. Not out of punishment. Not to make a statement. but because I finally understood something she never had. You don't leave someone once. You leave them again, and again, and again, until one day, they walk away before you get the chance to do it all over. That night, I packed a single duffel bag. Clothes. My passport. Some cash I had forgotten I kept in a fireproof box. I turned off my phone. I stood in the living room one last time. And then I left. No note. No forwarding address. No dramatic goodbye. Just absence. Because that's all she ever gave me. And I finally decided to return the favor. I didn't go far, at first. For the first 2 nights, I stayed at a roadside motel 2 towns over. Nothing fancy. A yellow light flickered outside my door, and the walls were thin enough to hear the guy in the next room snore like a malfunctioning lawnmower. But it was quiet in my head, and that was something I hadn't felt in months. I didn't tell anyone where I went. Not even my brother, who had called and left a dozen voicemails over the past few weeks asking if I was okay. I figured he'd figure it out eventually. Or he wouldn't. That was okay too. I just needed silence. Not the empty kind I used to drown in, but the clean kind. The healing kind. After 3 days, I bought a train ticket north. I ended up in a small lake town where no one knew my name. It had an old bookstore, a diner with mismatched coffee mugs, and a quiet trail that circled a frozen lake. I found a short-term rental above a hardware store, tiny, creaky, but with a view of the water that made me feel like I was watching the world breathe. The first few weeks were strange. I kept waking up expecting to hear her in the shower. I still caught myself reaching for my phone to text her things that didn't matter. Jokes, weather updates, thoughts about nothing. Habits die slow. But the distance helped. And more importantly, the truth did too. Because as much as her betrayal broke me, it also showed me exactly what I needed to heal from. Not just her, but myself. My fear of being alone. My tendency to define my worth through her happiness. My belief that loving someone meant sacrificing every part of yourself. I started doing things I hadn't done in years. I took long walks without checking the time. I cooked meals that weren't microwavable. I bought a second-hand camera and started photographing birds, which, embarrassingly, I'm actually decent at. I wrote in a notebook every morning, even if it was just one sentence. And slowly, the version of me that was always waiting for her return, for her apology, for her affection, started to vanish. In his place was someone quieter, but stronger. And then, one day, spring arrived. Not all at once, but in pieces. A hint of green in the trees. A warmer breeze. Kids laughing near the lake. It felt like permission to breathe again. That same week, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. But I knew the handwriting. It was short. Russell, I hope you're okay. I know you probably hate me. I wouldn't blame you if you did. But if you ever wonder whether any of it meant anything, it did. All of it. I just wasn't strong enough to protect it. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I finally understand what I broke. D. I folded the letter and placed it in the back of a drawer. Not because I planned to keep it, but because I wasn't ready to throw it out yet. And maybe that was okay. Healing isn't always about purging. Sometimes it's about accepting. And I realized something else too. She wasn't my story anymore. She was a chapter. A long one, a painful one, but just a chapter. A few weeks later, I got a job helping out at the local library. It's nothing glamorous, but it gives me structure. I stock shelves. Recommend mystery novels to retirees. Sometimes I teach kids how to print things. I've even started planning a small photography exhibit of the birds I've captured through my lens. There's a quiet elegance to creatures that never stay in one place too long. The other day, a woman stopped me in the aisle between gardening and cookbooks. She asked if I could help her find something for her niece's birthday. She was wearing a navy blue coat and had that kind of face that looked like it had spent more time laughing than frowning. We ended up talking for 20 minutes about the best children's books that don't talk down to kids. When I handed her the book, she smiled. I'm June, by the way. I smiled back. Russell. And for the first time in a very long time. I was glad to say my name. She walked away with her book. I walked back to the front desk. And just before I sat down, I whispered something to myself. I made it. Because I did. Not in a loud, triumphant, movie ending kind of way, but in the real, quiet, deeply human way. I didn't win her back. I didn't burn her memory. I didn't rewrite the past. But I reclaimed myself. And somehow, that was everything.